November 14th, 1989, Tuesday, 7:42 a.m. Dennis put on his brown corduroy jacket. He picked up his car keys. He told me he was going to Kroger for a gallon of milk. I was packing lunches at the kitchen counter. Turkey for Julia, peanut butter for Thomas, mashed banana for Claire, 3 children under 8, 3 paper bags, 1 mother who had been up since 5, get the whole milk. I said, "Not 2%, I know," he said. The screen door slapped shut behind him. A metallic sound like a small bone breaking. I heard his Pontiac pull out of the driveway. The engine faded down Burkhardt Avenue and disappeared into the gray November air. That was the last time I heard my husband's voice for Tatlumput Pito years. He said he was going to buy milk. He took his keys, his wallet with $12 in it, and Tatlumput Pito years of my life. If you've ever had someone walk out and never come back, stay with me. This story has an ending. Not the ending I wanted, but the one I earned. The afternoon became a slow drowning. I called Kroger at noon. No one matching Dennis's description had been in that morning. I called his office at Midwest Mutual Insurance. He never arrived. By 6, I called the police. By 9, Officer Dwight Rearin was sitting at my kitchen table, spelling my husband's name on a yellow notepad. DENNISGERALDASH, WORTH. He measured the details of my husband in inches and pounds, as if a man could be summarized by his dimensions. 5'11", 170 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing a corduroy jacket and carrying $12. Julia stood in the doorway in her nightgown. She was 7. "When is Daddy coming home?" "Soon," I said. That was the first time I lied to my children. It would not be the last. The refrigerator hummed behind me. The turkey sandwiches I never finished packing sat on the counter, going warm and starting to curl at the edges. The milk in the carton was running low, half a gallon, maybe less, and the screen door was still unlocked. I would not lock it for 3 weeks, because what if he came back and didn't have his key? His car was not at any hospital, not at any accident site, not in any parking lot. The police checked that first night. Dennis Ashworth had driven away from our house on a Tuesday morning and dissolved into the gray November air like exhaust from a tailpipe. Julia asked me 4 times that night when Daddy was coming back. I said soon 4 times. 4 lies, small and soft, the kind you tell a child, so she'll sleep. The kind that calcify into something much harder when the person you're waiting for never walks back through the door. Weeks became a procession of dead ends. The police found his Pontiac at the Cincinnati Airport long-term lot, $47 in accumulated parking fees, but no flight records matched his name, no credit card activity, no ATM withdrawals after November 13th. Dennis Ashworth had walked into an airport and vanished from every system designed to track a living person. I hired a private investigator in 1990. His name was Carl Weber. He charged $60 an hour, and over 2 years I paid him $0.4 dollars. My entire emergency fund, every dollar I had scraped together since the day Dennis left. Carl traced the car to the airport and hit the same wall the police had. "Mrs. Ashworth, he doesn't want to be found. Or he's dead," I said. "Or he's dead," Carl agreed. I visited the county morgue 3 times to look at unidentified bodies. 3 men on steel tables under fluorescent light, each one wrong in ways I was simultaneously terrified and relieved by. None of them had his hands. Dennis had long fingers, piano player's hands, though he never played. I was terrified one would be him. I was devastated none were. A body would have been an answer. A disappearance is just an open wound with no bandage and no stitches. Brenda Ashworth called me daily. She wept on the phone. She held my hand at her kitchen table and said, "He wouldn't just leave you. Miriam, something terrible must have happened." She poured me coffee with steady hands. I remember the steadiness. I think about it now. Steady hands for a woman whose son was supposedly missing. Steady as stone. Steady as someone who already knows the answer. 19 Kaiti, I was 32, alone with 3 children under 8. My salary at Dayton Central High School, $24,200 per year. I sat at the kitchen table one night after the kids were asleep and did the math. $2,016 per month before taxes. Mortgage, $640. Utilities, $180. Groceries for 4, $320. That left $876 for everything else. Gas, clothes, medical bills, car repairs, school supplies, and whatever God decided to break next. I became very good at math, not the kind they teach in school. The kind where you calculate whether you can afford both the electric bill and new shoes for Thomas. I learned to cut hair. I learned to patch drywall. I learned to sleep 4 hours and function on coffee and stubbornness, and the knowledge that no one was coming to save me. I learned that you can cry in the shower with the water running, and your children will never hear you. Julia started having nightmares. She would jolt awake at 2 in the morning screaming about a door, the screen door slamming shut in her dreams over and over. The sound of her father leaving replaying in her 7-year-old brain like a record that skipped and never stopped skipping. I would hold her and say, "It's just a door, sweetheart." Another lie. Thomas went quiet. He was 4 when Dennis left, a boy who talked constantly about trucks and clouds and why the sky was up instead of sideways. After November 14th, he barely spoke. His preschool teacher called me in. "Is Thomas okay?" I said yes. Another lie. Claire was one too young to understand. She wouldn't remember his face, his voice, or that screen door. She would grow up knowing only his absence, which is its own kind of presence. A shape cut out of every family photo, every holiday, every father-daughter dance she never attended. I stopped asking, when will he come back? I started asking, how do I make it to Friday? The years passed the way years do when you are too busy surviving to notice them. One grocery run, one graded paper, one sleepless night at a time. 1992. I started tutoring on Saturdays and Sundays, earning an extra $200 a month. I spent it on winter coats and brake pads. 1996. Julia's first soccer game. I sat in the metal bleachers in October wind, clapping until my hands were raw. The seat beside me was empty. It was always empty. 1998 department chair salary, $34,000. I could finally afford to eat lunch instead of skipping it. 2001, Thomas turned 16. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked, "Is my father dead?" I said, "I don't know, sweetheart." The first honest answer I had given about Dennis in 12 years. 2004, I enrolled in a master's program at Wright State University, classes Tuesday and Thursday nights. The babysitter cost $15 an hour. When I couldn't afford her, I brought the kids to campus and they did homework in the hallway outside my classroom. 2006, assistant principal, $50, $2,000. For the first time in 17 years, I did not bounce a check. $2,010. Claire graduated high school as valedictorian. Her speech was 4 minutes long. She thanked my mother, who was both parents. She did not mention her father. There was nothing to mention.
2012 principal $78,000, 2023 retirement after 42 years. The school board gave me a plaque. I went home to a quiet house with a paid-off mortgage and a refrigerator that always had milk in it. I had kept milk in that refrigerator for 34 years. I bought it every week. I didn't always drink it. I just needed it to be there. I raised 3 children on $34,000 a year, and every single one of them graduated college. Strength had nothing to do with it. I didn't have the luxury of being weak. Oktubre 2026. I was 68 years old, retired 3 years. My days had found a rhythm. Morning walk through the neighborhood, coffee on the porch, if the weather allowed. volunteer work at the Dayton Metro Library on Wednesdays, dinner with Julia's family on Sundays. I was not unhappy. I was not happy either. I existed in a space I had carved between those two things, a territory that had no name but felt like mine. The house was the same Cape Cod on Burkhardt Avenue that Dennis and I bought in 1981 for $62,000. But every surface had been replaced over the decades. New paint, new floors, new curtains, new appliances. I had sanded and refinished and repainted until nothing in the house remembered him. Nothing except the screen door. The screen door was original. Same aluminum frame, same hinges. I had repainted it twice, rescreened it 3 times, but the hinges were the same. They still made that sound. Metallic, percussive, vinyl. I never replaced them. I did not know why. People asked me if I ever moved on. I don't know what that means. I moved forward. Forward is not the same as on. November was approaching the way it always does. The air changing, the light going thin, the cold settling into the bones of the house. November 14th was a date that lived in my chest like a second heartbeat, and each year I marked it with a quiet ritual. I went to Kroger, bought a gallon of whole milk, put it in the refrigerator. I didn't always drink it. I just needed it to be there. The same brand, the same red cap, the same weight in my hand. November was 2 weeks away. I could already feel the tightening in my ribs. I thought that was the worst thing November would bring me this year. I was wrong. Sunday evening, October 25th, 2026. I was on the couch with my iPad scrolling Facebook the way retired people do without urgency, half reading, half drifting, church friends' posts, recipe shares, photos of grandchildren in Halloween costumes. Donna Perkins, a friend from First Lutheran, had visited her daughter in Scottsdale, Arizona the previous week. She posted an album, Desert Fun with the Family, I liked. The first photo, Donna and her daughter at a restaurant, both sunburned and smiling. I scrolled to the second, a neighborhood block party, a wide shot, tiki torches and folding tables, and a dozen people milling around with paper plates. I stopped. In the background, slightly out of focus, holding a glass of red wine and laughing, a man's silver hair swept back, tanned, 40 pounds heavier than I remembered, but the tilt of his head, that specific 15-degree tilt when he laughed, chin up, eyes nearly closing, was as familiar to me as my own handwriting. I zoomed in, the dimple on his left cheek, the left ear sitting slightly lower than the right, a detail so small that only someone who had slept beside him for 8 years would notice. The bare ring finger where a wedding band should have been.
Dennis, I said aloud. The first time I had spoken his name in years. It came out of my mouth like something I'd swallowed decades ago and never fully digested. My hands went cold. My vision narrowed to the size of that screen. I sat perfectly still for 11 minutes. I know because I checked the clock when I finally moved. A teacher's habit, marking time even when time has stopped making sense.
I have looked for his face in 10,000 strangers over 37 years, in airports, in grocery stores, in the obituary pages every Sunday morning, and there he was, in the background of a block party in Arizona, holding a glass of Merlot, laughing as if he had never destroyed anyone. I took a screenshot. I called Julia. Julia arrived in 18 minutes. She lives 12 minutes away, which tells you how fast she drove. She walked in without knocking, took the iPad from my hands, and looked at the photo for 3 seconds. Where does he live? That's my Julia. She doesn't grieve. She plans. I called Thomas next. He lives in Columbus, 70 miles east. I told him what I'd found. Silence on the line. Not a breath, not a word for 40 seconds. Then are you sure? I'm sure. Okay, he said, and hung up. He didn't call back for 3 days. Claire reached on FaceTime. She was in her living room, Matteo building Legos on the carpet behind her, his 6-year-old hands assembling something complicated while his mother's world rearranged itself. Claire looked at the screenshot. She tilted her head, the same tilt,
the exact same 15-degree angle as the man in the photo, a genetic echo that made my stomach clench. She has his jaw, his laugh, his mannerism. She has everything of his, except his memory.
So he's alive, she said. Not a question, a classification. The way you'd note a weather report. He's alive. What do you want to do, Mom? The question landed on me like a dropped stone. What did I want? Revenge, answers. An apology, I didn't know. Not yet. But something in Claire's voice, the way she asked it, without anger, without grief, with the detached curiosity of someone examining a stranger, told me Dennis had already lost. He lost the youngest one completely. She didn't even care enough to be angry. You didn't die, Dennis. You just decided we weren't worth staying alive for. I thought that sentence. I didn't say it yet. But it was forming the way a sentence does in the mind of an English teacher, word by word, until it's sharp enough to cut. Julia took over. That girl was born to organize a campaign, and this was the campaign she'd been unconsciously training for her entire life. She started with the Facebook photo. Reverse image search returned nothing. The figure was too far in the background, too low resolution to match any database. But the photo was geotagged, Scottsdale, Arizona Desert Ridge Community. Julia pulled up Maricopa County property records and searched for male homeowners aged 65 to 75 in that zip code. 47 results, a haystack. He would be in real estate or sales. I said he could always sell anything, especially himself. Julia cross-referenced with Arizona. Department of Real Estate license holders, 8 names. She pulled their license photos from the state website Public Record, free to access the bureaucratic machinery that tracks who can sell your house. Also, it turns out, tracks who is hiding from his family. The 4th photo stopped us both. David Raymond Mercer, license issued Isang Libot Siyam Naran, Siyam Napu. The headshot was from his last renewal, Sampu years old, slightly grainy, but the jaw was right, the dimple was right. The ear was right. It was Dennis Ashworth behind a name I had never heard, selling houses in Arizona while I raised his children in Ohio. David Raymond Mercer. He kept his dead father's name, Raymond Gerald Ashworth's middle name. Even when he erased us, he couldn't erase Gerald. The Arizona Department of Real Estate keeps license photos online. A $20 database search and 30 minutes of Julia's determination. Undid 36 years of hiding. He wasn't caught by a detective or an algorithm. He was caught by a church friend's vacation photos and a daughter who inherited her mother's stubbornness. I stared at his face on the screen. My husband had been selling houses in the desert sun while I counted quarters for gas in the Ohio cold. Julia and I spent 4 days mapping the life of David Mercer, everything we needed. Was public record. That's the thing about building a new identity. You have to register it somewhere, and somewhere keeps receipts. Property deed, 14,827, North Scottsdale Road. Purchase 2009, $780,000. Zillow showed a 4-bedroom stucco house with a pool, a landscaped yard with a saguaro cactus, and a 3-car garage. Our house in Dayton has 3 bedrooms. There was always a bedroom we converted to storage because I couldn't afford to furnish it. His brokerage website featured a smiling headshot and a tagline, 30 years of trust. I read that line 3 times, 30 years of trust. I taught English for 42 years, and I could not find a word in any language for what I felt reading those 4 words. Julia found the wedding announcement in the Scottsdale Independent, dated January 1993. David Mercer and Valerie Holt were married at Desert Botanical Garden. A photograph accompanied it, Dennis in a white linen suit, a woman in ivory lace, both tanned and radiant, against a backdrop of desert flowers. January 1993. I was 35 that year. I was working 2 jobs, teaching during the day, tutoring at night. I was sleeping 4 hours. I was mending Thomas's winter coat with a needle and thread because the zipper broke and a new coat cost a $50 I didn't have. I was still legally married to the man in the white suit. His real estate brokerage brought in roughly $210,000 a year based on the transaction records we could find. He drove a 2024 BMW X5. I drove a 1994 Honda Civic until 2007. 210,000 miles and a prayer, 30 years of trust. The man built an entire life on a foundation of fraud, and he had the nerve to call it trust. Julia sat across from me at the kitchen table. The same table where I had packed 10,000 lunches and graded a 100,000 papers. She had that look on her face, the one she gets when she's working through a problem at the hospital, sorting symptoms into a diagnosis. Mom, did you ever file for divorce? I sat very still. No, I never did. In the first years, I couldn't. You can't divorce someone who might be dead without a 7-year waiting period and a court declaration of presumed death. By the time those 7 years passed in 1996, I was drowning in work and children and had no money for a lawyer. By the 2000s, I had accepted a kind of widowhood without death, a legal limbo. I never bothered to resolve because resolving it meant admitting he was gone, and admitting he was gone meant I had to stop listening. For the screen door, I pulled my marriage certificate from the fireproof box under my bed. Montgomery County, Ohio, June 14, 1981. Miriam June Holloway and Dennis Gerald Ashworth. The paper was yellowed at the edges, creased down the center, still bearing both our signatures in blue ink. The marriage was still valid. Dennis never filed either. Of course he didn't. Filing for divorce would have created a paper trail to a man who was supposed to not exist, which meant his marriage to Valerie Holt in 1993 was bigamous, a felony in Arizona. Arizona Revised Statute Section 13-3606. His real estate license depended on a character verification check. His entire professional life was built on a lie wrapped inside a crime. I held that certificate and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not grief, not sorrow. Power. I had been his wife for 45 years. He had been my husband for 8. We kept digging. Each layer was worse than the one before it. David Mercer was a member of the Scottsdale National Golf Club. I looked up the membership fees. $18,000 a year. I could have fed my children for years on that. He and Valerie vacationed in Cabo San Lucas every February. Julia found the resort tagged in Valerie's Instagram posts. White sand, turquoise water, matching robes by the pool. I thought of the year I put cardboard inside Thomas's shoes because I couldn't afford new ones until the next paycheck. I thought of the Christmas I wrapped 3 gifts each, all from the dollar store, and told them Santa was doing things differently this year. Julia was old enough to know. She didn't say anything. She thanked me for the coloring book and the socks and the candy bar. And she meant it because Julia understood at 9 what some people never learn. You thank the person who shows up even when the gifts are small, especially when the gifts are small. I thought of the night I sat in my car in the school parking lot after parent-teacher conferences and cried because a father complained about my lack of engagement. He didn't know I had been up since Appet in the morning grading papers because my only free hours were before dawn. He didn't know I tutored until 9 every evening and came home to 3 children who needed help with homework and baths and bedtime stories. He didn't know I was doing it alone. Dennis knew. He knew because he made that choice every single day for 37 years and never once turned the car around.